It's college football season, which means you need the unbeatable coverage of Sling TV starting at $35 a month. Sling has all the big games on all the biggest channels like ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3, SEC Network, ACC Network, Fox, and the Big Ten Network, all for the best price. You can stream to any device. You can record up to 50 hours with your included DVR space. You can pause or change your service at any time. Check out sling.com for special offers. Sling, the live TV you love at a price you'll love. Try it today. And welcome to the Andy Staples Show, presented by Sling. Ari and I back together. Ari, sort of back from travel hell. He's still got to get where he's going, but at least he's not locked on an airplane anymore. He was last night.
Yeah, I mean, I have complained to everybody in my family about it for 3 hours. And I don't want to be the typical sports writer who just complains about their travel. So
I think you're allowed to complain about this particular one because I've never actually heard of someone losing the key to the jetway to let the people who are on the plane off at 3 a.m.
Yeah, after we were back at the jetway because the stewardess that they chose for our flight had worked too many hours that day.
Flight attendant.
Stewardess, like, bad word?
Yeah.
Oh.
For like 20 years now.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. The flight attendants were overworked. Yeah, it was awful. But I'm happy because the one thing that it got us to do was the podcast earlier in the day. It clears up your day, and you came out a winner, bud. And you always come out on top, don't you?
That's exactly right. Your turmoil is just more winning for me, and that's all that really matters.
Scarf down a bunch of mustard on your show for you. You know what I mean? I've already lost that bet. So,
Ari, listen. Okay, so for those who didn't listen to the emergency show on Friday when Quinn Ewers was named the starting quarterback at Texas, Ari and I have a bet. Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas, has his own Bijan Mustardson. And Ari and I made a bet because Ari has been a big believer in Quinn Ewers this entire time. And I feel like he needs to just show it. I think he needs to show how much he believes.
Staples Show history that my side was chosen for me. Let the record show.
Your side was chosen for you by your actions.
I think
over
that
the last
year
and a half
is the right person to start. I don't know if feeding me to the Alabama Wolves is the way I wanted to go about it, but hey, for the show and for my point of view, I'm happy to do it. I already have a strategy in place that I'm not going to share with you just in case I happen to backdoor cover that game. And
does it involve hot, soft pretzels? Because that would be a great way to do it.
Yeah, that would be a great way to do it.
It'd be painful.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about you. You gave me your strategy.
No, there's no way. So for those who don't know, if Alabama covers, Ari has to eat a whole bottle of Bijan Robinson's mustard. If Texas covers, I have to eat a whole bottle of Bijan Robinson's mustard. We're going to set a 4-hour time limit. You can eat it plain or you can put it on something, but the entire bottle has to be exhausted. So like if you want to go hot, soft pretzels, which is a delicious thing to dip in mustard, you're going to have to eat a lot of pretzels to get through that bottle.
We got to figure out how to do it for the show because a 4-hour time limit, unless people want to watch me eat for 4 hours.
We can time lapse it, or we can say it's an hour. We can say it's during the show. You want to change the terms?
I don't know. I feel like if you're going to do it, you just have to do it in an hour.
All right. Done. The committee is met. We have a quorum.
What is the extra time going to do? It's going to be miserable either way.
Might
as well just get it over with.
It actually gets, for those who've never done any sort of eating competition, it actually gets worse the longer you go.
Yeah.
So you're right.
This can't possibly be worse than eating the death chip. So I've counted the mountain of like awful things to eat on this show. So everything that we do here, but it'll be funny because I said I was so excited to watch this Texas-Alabama game because I wanted to see Quinn play in that competition, and their opener I think is on Longhorn Network, which if you have Sling, you get.
You got it. That's right. You got the Longhorn Network.
So a lot of people aren't going to get to watch that. So it'll be the first nationally televised game of his career against Alabama. So I was excited to watch it before, but now my life depends on it. So I'm looking forward to it. And, I think I can do the mustard thing. I really like the Dijon mustard. And also the friendly folks at the Bijan Robinson mustard company said they would provide the mustard for us. So
which is nice.
Yes.
I want a whole case of it anyway because I love Dijon mustard too. So BetMGM.com has the top 10 Heisman contenders. They put these out on Monday, Ari. Did you know this Alabama-Texas game will feature 4 of the top 10 Heisman contenders, 2 of whom actually have a chance to win the Heisman?
That's right. Wait, so
and that would be Bryce Young,
Bryce Young
and Will Anderson, who play for Alabama.
Yes, and then Bijan Robinson and
Quinn Ewers.
Who,
Quinn Ewers is 20-1 to win the Heisman. These people are insane.
I mean, do you think that the odds should be worse?
Yes. Yes.
What? So, like, I think our friend Bud Elliott tweeted out, like, would you rather bet 20-1 that Quinn Ewers wins the Heisman, or 8-1 that Texas makes the playoff? And I think that Quinn Ewers winning the Heisman at 20-1 is better.
It's more likely than Texas making the playoff.
But, or if
Texas is not making the playoff, so that's easy.
If Texas makes the playoff, it'll likely be because Quinn Ewers was very good. So,
true.
You know, if you put yourself in that frame of mind, you always want to go for the best odds. And like, if I look at this right now, I mean, the person who wins the Heisman might not even be on this list, right? So, like, if you think about like the best way to go about it, like, to me, I've always been a long odds better when it comes to these types of things. And like, if I look at this list here, let's
go over the list. CJ Stroud, Ohio State quarterback, is the favorite at 2-1. The defending Heisman winner, Bryce Young, 7-2 to repeat, become the only repeat Heisman winner since Archie Griffin, who was the only repeat Heisman winner. Caleb Williams at USC is 6-1. Bijan Robinson, 16-1. Will Anderson, Alabama linebacker, the actual best player in the country, 20-1. Quinn Ewers, 20-1. Here's the ultimate value play right here. Oklahoma quarterback Dylan Gabriel, 20-1. Dylan Gabriel is going to put up massive numbers this year. Oklahoma is going to win the Big 12. He's going to be in the mix. I don't know if he's going to win it. I don't know if he's going to go to New York, but he's going to be in the mix. So
you're already making the case for who you should pick, because that's who I was going to take.
That's an easy one. Travion Henderson, Ohio State running back, 20-1. He's going to be great too. Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson, 20-1. Very intriguing because the skill set is there, but you don't know if he can stay healthy. You don't know what he's going to look like in a brand new offense with a new coach. So who knows? Clemson quarterback DJ Uiagalelei, 20-1. He'll either get better or he'll get benched in favor of Cade Klubnik. So
your pick is Dylan Gabriel, right?
On this list, in terms of value,
you also have to think about value. Like, I think it's
100%.
Unquestionably Dylan Gabriel, and this isn't shtick either.
Yeah,
but I would think that throwing $50 or $20 on Quinn would be a good bet too, rather than put $100 on CJ, because it's like everybody thinks that CJ is going to win it, but with all the crazy stuff that happens in college football, you know, maybe somebody who wins the Heisman, like I said, isn't even on this list. But I would take the 2 quarterbacks in a conference where prolific offensive numbers are prevalent, schedules aren't overly difficult, and like, if the fantasy land happens. And then the problem with Texas, and the reason why I would go with Gabriel over Quinn, is because Texas has to play Alabama, and that's gonna be a really tough thing for people.
I go with Gabriel over Quinn because I know he's gonna put up huge numbers and they're gonna win.
Yeah.
I don't know if Texas is gonna win.
Yes, but I'm saying if I had to bet any of the 2 on this list based on the odds, I'm not going to bet on Will Anderson, even though I think he would be third.
I actually think that might be value too, because I think
we're getting to the point as a voters where we're trying to think about it differently.
Yeah, you've got people like me who correctly believe that Will Anderson was the best player in the country last year and voted him number 1 for the Heisman anyway.
He did last year?
Yeah.
One?
Yeah. He was the best player in the country.
Hutchinson number 1 last year, but I think that voters are more likely to.
Will Anderson was better than Aiden Hutchinson at doing the same thing.
Yeah, you know, maybe that's the right take. I don't know. I thought that
he had 33.5 tackles for loss.
I am not sitting here arguing with you that Brian Anderson is the best defensive. Sorry, what did I say? Brian Anderson?
Brian Anderson. I don't know who that is.
Bryce, there's a Bijan. Like, just cut me. I mean,
a lot of
like I'm running on 2 hours of sleep here, 2 of which happened on an airplane that wasn't air conditioned. Will Anderson's the best player in college football, and I think he was last year too. Like, the person who won the Heisman last year wasn't even the best player on his own team.
Correct.
So like I'm with you on that 100%. The reason why I chose Aiden Hutchinson is because he had the best performance for a transcendent win for his program. That
so you based it off one game instead of an entire season?
He had a great year. I mean, it's not like he had a bad year.
It wasn't as good of a year as Will Anderson.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, it's just, to me, I thought Aiden Hutchinson was a program lifter. I think that you have to, like, think about, like, who, like, the way that I was taught to vote for the Heisman is You have to vote for the people that you think told the story of the season.
Who is the best player?
It's not.
You vote for the best player.
It's never been the best player because the best player never wins.
It's supposed to be the best player.
I know, but the way that I vote
it
for the
says
Heisman
most outstanding player.
Which person can you not mention or that you have to mention while telling the story of the season? Now, as good as Will Anderson was,
they're not in the national championship game without Will Anderson. Did Michigan make the national championship game? No, they did not. Did Michigan beat Georgia? No, they did not. Alabama did beat Georgia the first time they played.
I know, and the person who was rewarded for that was the quarterback.
And
if you go back in time and ask people about last year's Alabama team in 5 years from now, they're not going to be talking about Will Anderson. They're going to be talking about Bryce Young, which is why
they will talk about Will Anderson in the same way that Alabama
do you think that
talk
the
about
regular
Derek
fan,
Thomas.
Do you think that the regular casual college football fan even knows who he is?
I don't care about the regular casual college football fan.
I know, but I'm saying the Heisman
understand
Trophy,
what the game is
the Heisman
about.
Trophy is a national award given to the person who is the most outstanding player. And I know you're going to say the best player. I know, but the most outstanding player as it pertains to who tells the story of the season.
No, it's just supposed to be the most outstanding player.
I know.
That's
the most outstanding
That's
player
all
hasn't won an award in like 50 years. So, like, you know, how many offensive linemen have been the best player at their position? I mean, there have been years where the best player in college football is a punter.
Orlando Pace. And yes,
didn't win
I realize that's the same year that Danny Werfel won the Heisman, and we got these sweet hats.
Who do you think was better at their position, Danny Werfel or Orlando Pace?
Orlando Pace.
Who do you think is better than Orlando Pace at their position in the history of college football?
Jonathan Ogden?
Maybe. But I'm just saying, like, that's not the way the award works. So, like, in your world of vote for the best player, I wish that was what the award was, but that's not what it is.
Brian Gann with a good point. Most outstanding player that has to play at a blue blood. I will amend that. It's the most outstanding quarterback, running back, or receiver who plays for a team that you've heard of that won at least 9 games. That's what it is.
And also, Will Anderson was my second pick. I went 2 defensive players with 1 and 2.
I appreciate that.
Because, like,
I wish you'd actually pick the better player, but that's cool.
You know, and that's fine. If you think that my logic is flawed, I understand that that's our right as voters to disagree. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at this list and you're trying to figure out exactly how you would want to bet it, you have to put yourself in the minds of the people that don't have any imagination at all and just vote, really good quarterback on best team. I'm just going to auto.
I know, but I realize that's how it's going to go down is the people with no imagination will carry the day.
And like Bryce Young won the Heisman.
Which unfortunately is the truth of so many different things in life.
Did Bryce Young win the Heisman because of the Auburn drive?
Maybe.
If that Auburn drive didn't
happen.
No,
I think he won the Heisman because of the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I mean, he played really, really well in both of those.
Which without the Auburn drive, you know.
Yeah, the Auburn drive, I think.
Auburn, maybe they don't do that.
Because C.J. Stroud was the favorite before the Auburn game, wasn't he?
I think so.
I think he was the odds-on favorite at that time, and then Bryce Young led that drive against Auburn. That was insane, and then they kicked the crap out of Georgia in the SEC championship game, and I was like, okay, there it is. So, like, I mean, I guess quarterback at Alabama and quarterback at Ohio State are clearly the best odds. But, like, as much as, like, Bijan Robinson, you can make the case is as good at his position as anybody else is at theirs, right? Like, is Bijan Robinson much worse as a running back than Will Anderson is as a rusher linebacker?
Will Anderson is transcendent and the best of that type of person who's come along in at least 20 years. So, yes.
Do you think he'll be the number 1 overall pick in the draft next year?
There have been really good running backs.
Do you think he'll be the number 1 pick in the draft next year?
If there's not a quarterback needy team at number 1.
Yeah. I mean, he's insanely good. I'm not trying to like.
He will be number 1 if he would have been number 1 this year had he come out. So if a team needs a quarterback, they're going to draft C.J. Stroud or whatever they think is the best quarterback.
The point of this whole conversation here, Andy, is that you're not just betting on how good Will Anderson is because everybody knows it. You're also betting on the temperament of the voters.
But if you're throwing a couple bucks on a 20-1, Will Anderson, because maybe he has an unbelievable. I don't even know if he can repeat what he did last year, but maybe he does. Dylan Gabriel, because he's a quarterback at a blue blood program who is gonna put up huge numbers and they're gonna win games. So they'll win, even if they don't win the Big 12, they'll win the minimum number of games required. You got to win 9 games. So they'll win the 9 games at least, and he'll put up massive numbers at a blue blood. And then Anthony Richardson.
I was just going to ask you.
I don't know if they're going to win enough games, but if he is good enough to compete for the Heisman, they might.
Yeah. Also, like Oklahoma quarterback winning the Heisman has been such a successful
It's a good formula.
I mean, and I know that Lincoln Riley's not the coach anymore, but I do think that they have the talent and they play in a conference where it could be the sexiest situation. And Dylan Gabriel can play. Like, I don't know if people give him enough credit. Like,
he's really
he's
good.
really good. So
reuniting with Jeff Lebby, who was the OC at UCF his freshman year, which was probably his best year.
Even though we were just at each other's throats at 10:22 in the morning on a Monday, I think that we both, at the end of that arc of a conversation, agree that the best value plays Gabriel, right?
I agree. Yes, absolutely. Because he fits all the requirements of those the uncreative people who are voting that you're talking about.
But so does Caleb Williams, and he's 6-1, as Brian Gann just asked. So, Caleb Williams plays for Lincoln Riley in an offense, but I don't know if they will win enough games either.
I think Oklahoma may be in the playoff conversation, either because they're going to make the playoff or they're just in it.
But let's continue this conversation because you just freaked out over best player overall, right?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Does the team have to be if you want to give the Heisman to the best player, and the best player is not on a very good team, how do you kind of work through that?
The Paul Hornung?
Well, it's what if Caleb Williams puts up insane numbers and USC is 8-4?
I don't think he'll win it, but if he's the best player, I'm going to vote.
How you would vote for him?
I would vote for him if he's the best. If I think he's the best player in the country.
So, have you been voting for defensive players for the last 10 years?
The first vote I ever cast, first place, was Ndamukong Suh. That was the first year I was a Heisman voter.
Okay, so you haven't changed the way that you've thought about defensive players as you've.
No, I had Honey Badger on my ballot. Now I didn't have Honey Badger 1 in 2011, but I had him on my ballot.
Okay, so you've always been the best player on the best team guy,
the best player.
Period.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if that's your way of going about it, do you ever
Here's how I do it.
How you think that other people are voting too?
What's that?
Do you ever consider how you think other people are going to vote to get the best?
I don't care how other people are voting.
But it's like voting for the presidential election, right? You want to vote for the candidate that
you're calling me a Ross Perot voter. Is that what you're calling me?
I don't really understand politics enough to know it, but if you wrote somebody in last year, you wasted your vote, right?
Listen, it says vote for the most outstanding player. So I vote for the most outstanding player. I take the season.
Then why do you consider anything about the season? You don't, right?
No, you have to consider the entire season.
But you don't consider the record of the team, though.
It's an award for this season.
But you don't consider the record of the team.
I consider what the player did this season.
Okay.
So the most outstanding player this season. So I look at this season and this season only. What happened last year doesn't matter. What happens next year doesn't matter. And I say, if I were drafting a college football team, what player would I draft first? Using only the data from this season.
That's good. So did you think about anybody else in that scenario? If you're looking, are you sure that
for last year?
So Will Anderson is the
Will Anderson was
dunk.
far
what was
and
your
away.
whole ballot? Do you remember?
It was Will Anderson. Oh, great. Now I can't think of it.
Was Trayvon Walker on your ballot?
Trayvon Walker was not on my ballot, but Trayvon Walker was not one of the best. Trayvon Walker was a talented player with a very high ceiling, but he was not he wasn't even necessarily the best player on Georgia's defense.
Was Aiden Hutchinson on your ballot?
I believe he might have been number 3.
Okay.
And then I think I had I think I had Bryce Young number 2. I have to go back and look.
I think Bryce Young was 3rd.
CJ Stroud, it might have been Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, because I was trying to decide between Aiden Hutchinson was in that mix too.
Because I'm the big Ohio State homer, but CJ wasn't even on my ballot because of the way they lost that Michigan game. It's I take that into account. Your job as the quarterback.
I'm not sure how much I blame CJ for that, but
it's not his fault. But the quarterback at Ohio State winning the Heisman the year they lose to Michigan just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and look, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, I think the NFL people will like CJ better.
They will. He'll be the first pick in the draft.
But I think Bryce Young may actually be a just as good or better college quarterback because of his unique skill set, just the way he can kind of float, the way he floats behind the line of scrimmage and keeps plays alive. You can't do in the NFL, but you can sure as hell do now in college football, and he's great at it.
And there's a huge distinction too between best college player and best pro prospect.
Exactly.
And I think people
it's not the same thing.
Conflate those two things.
But Will Anderson just happens to be both because he's an incredibly productive college player
who
and
also will be drafted
a
high.
big pro prospect.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do think that people because I'm like looking at the draft board right now, and it's like Jordan Davis was the trendy pick for the first half of the year, and then he got gassed in the SEC championship game. So he lost his. Is that why he's not on yours?
Actually, Jordan Davis might have been on my thing.
Okay. So you went all defense.
I didn't go all defense. I definitely had one of the two quarterbacks on there. I have to go back and look.
Yeah.
I need to go back and look. I know Will Anderson was number one. It was tough because it felt like everybody was kind of packed in there.
Yeah. And I don't actually remember exactly how I voted too, but like I was the only person that I don't think had Bryce Young on the ballot at all. Because I think that if you're not even the best player on your own team, then you shouldn't be on the ballot.
So Greg and Mary asked if Jackson Smith and Jigba and Will Anderson have a big season, do they cancel votes for the QBs on their team? I mean, Will Anderson didn't cancel enough votes for Bryce Young to keep him from winning last year. So
the thing that people have to understand is that the majority of the people who vote for this award don't have any imagination with it. They just look at the best team's quarterback and they figure out which person has the best stats and they just write them in.
Devontae Smith was so freaking good that you could not ignore the fact. Like, I voted for Devontae number one. I didn't vote for Mac number one. Now, I think I had Kyle Trask in my ballot last year or that year. And I think if I went back and had to do it over again, I would have put Kyle Pitts in that spot.
Yeah.
Because he was the more special.
It's like, I actually think that you could make the case that Kyle Pitts is a more transcendent tight end than Will Anderson is a linebacker. They're different years, but I think that like there's certain players, like, I mean, Kyle Pitts to me,
that one's close. That
is a Hall of Famer.
Right. That is a once in 15, 20 years type player. So that's a better comparison.
Yeah. So if that's the way you're looking at it, then I think that makes sense. So like I don't have to vote the same way as you to appreciate and understand.
Yeah. The Devontae Smith thing, I felt like it was so obvious. He was so good and really made that team go. So all right, we got the last
non-Alabama, or the last non-Alabama non-quarterback to win the Heisman. I mean, I think you got to go back to even before 2000. I'm looking at the list right now.
Non-Alabama non-quarterback. Very interesting.
Ron Dane in 1999.
Wow. That's crazy.
Because Devontae Smith won it as a
Derrick Henry
won it, and Mark Ingram won it. So the last three players who weren't quarterbacks that won the Heisman were all Alabama players.
That is wild. I had not realized that.
So I just realized that as you're looking at non-skill position players.
Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush was the last non-quarterback.
What year was that? 2005. Okay, I missed that.
So the last non-quarterback, non-Alabama.
Okay, but still, stat remains. Like if you're going to place a bet for a person that doesn't play quarterback and they're not in Alabama, then you're wasting your money.
Yes, if you're placing a bet, well, that also does contribute to the Will Anderson value at 20-1. But the Dillon Gabriel one, I still think is if you are thinking like most voters, Dillon Gabriel probably represents the most value at 20-1.
Agree.
All right, we got to pause. We're going to hear from our friends at Sling and at Roback. And then we'll be right back to talk about this Manti Te'o documentary because, man, that thing was wild and it brought back a lot of crazy, crazy memories. We'll be right back. It's college football season, which means you need Sling TV, where you can watch unbeatable college football coverage starting at $35 a month. Get everything you love about college football, rivalries, marching bands, bowl games, conference power rankings, all of it with Sling. Plus, Sling has all the big games on all the big channels like ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3, SEC Network, ACC Network, Fox, and the Big Ten Network, all for the best price. And the best part is getting Sling is easy. It's easy to set up, even easier to use. You can stream on any device and record up to 50 hours with your included DVR space. Plus, you won't get locked into a long-term contract. So if you're looking for the perfect place to spend your Saturdays, you need to take a look at Sling, where you can get everything you love about college football for the best price. Check out sling.com for special offers. Sling, the live TV you love at the price you'll love. Try it today. So a care package came in the mail not long ago with a Roback hat, a Roback polo, and a Roback hoodie. The hat has been my hat of the summer. The polo is fantastic. It's breathable, it's comfortable, and it's fun. The hoodie, unbelievable. So comfortable. And of course, within about 2 days, my wife stole it. So Roback, I might need just one more hoodie. But Roback is going to be a big part of this college football season because they're leading the NIL charge. They've signed up Alabama linebacker Will Anderson, who if you listen to this podcast, we think he's the best player in the country. Texas running back Bijan Robinson, who, if you listen to this podcast, we have a little bet involving another NIL deal of his, and Notre Dame tight end Michael Mayer. They're becoming the go-to activewear for college athletes. Their performance polos, hands down, the best polos out there. The performance hoodies, like I said, so comfortable. Your significant other will probably steal it, so just buy 2 right now. And finally, Roback is making their first ever intro to bottoms with everyday shorts. They're perfect for a day of activity or a night on the town. So use the code Andy on Roback.com for 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com and 20% off all polos, Q-zips, hoodies, and shorts with the code Andy. Roback.com, and the code is Andy. Welcome back. We got to talk about this Manti Te'o documentary. Ari, you texted me over the weekend. You're like, I saw this on a plane. We have to spend a whole podcast on this. And I watched it too. It was wild. It brought back so many memories from 10 years ago that, I mean, I just remember the season, that story breaking, and then the night Deadspin broke the story, I was actually in San Diego working on a story for SI, and they sent me, they're like, drive to Naya Tuiasosopo's house in far east LA County, like way out toward the desert, and go knock on the door. So I did, and nobody answered, but I knocked on the door.
Were they home?
They were home, and there were TV trucks everywhere, and it was wild.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you and I were in very different positions because you were a national college football reporter at the time. And I was a 21-year-old Ohio State reporter that was making $17,000 a year. So like your perspective on it and mine would be very different. And I don't know, from watching the documentary, did you learn anything that you didn't know?
Yes. Well, it answered the biggest question I had because I didn't know what the motive was. And before I go into this, I will warn everybody now. Spoilers. If you don't want the documentary spoiled for you, we turn this podcast off right now. Go watch it and come back after you've watched it. And we'll have a fun discussion. So when we found out what has happened with Naya Tuiasosopo since then, it all made sense because my biggest question that was not answered back then was, what is the motivation for anyone to do this? Were they just trying to torture Manti Te'o? Was Manti Te'o in on it? Who perpetrated it? Like, why would you perpetrate this? Well, now it all makes sense. So for those who haven't watched it, I'm going to spoil it for you. So Naya Tuiasosopo now goes by Naya. Naya is a transgender woman. And this character of Lene Kukua that Manti Te'o thought was his girlfriend was an invention of then Naya Tuiasosopo. Essentially, I don't know, a projection of the person they wanted to be? I think, is that the right description?
Listen, I've never been in a position where I've wanted to do this, but I've seen enough Catfish episodes with Handsome Neve to know that I feel like most of the time, the motivation, if not all the time, is the same type of manifestation of trying to project an image of yourself
that you want,
regardless of what the main motivation is of where you are personally in your life. There are things about yourself that you need to change or that you want to change and that you don't like, that you project onto somebody else on the internet. You create that image of yourself and then you can feel like you're that person. Yeah. So like, while I can kind of understand why somebody would get an outlet doing that, I don't think that it excuses how terrible it was.
Oh, it doesn't. You're torturing another person. And you find out that Manti Te'o was not the only person Naya Tuiasosopo did this to. Like, there were multiple people, and they would cut and run when it started getting a little bit, hairy.
So like the things that I learned, because like being an outsider, I was aware of all the jokes and everybody knows what happened. But I never knew before watching the documentary that people A, thought that he was in on it, or that people like thought that that was part of the potential there, and B, question his sexuality as a result of this and the other stuff that he had to deal with other than just having his heart broken. Because like I do think that it is as odd as it is to maybe some of the older generational people who are listening to the show to understand how somebody could fall in love or care about somebody that they've never met in person. I do think that in this world of texting nonstop and phone calls and all the things that we have at our disposal, that you could learn to really care about somebody. And it's funny because I had met my current wife in person many times, obviously, but her and I were in a long distance relationship for 2 years. And she was in Dallas and I was in Ohio, and our relationship in the rock of it was just based on talking to each other and learning each other and really having those moments that it's kind of easy to not have in person because, you know, you're not looking at your phone, you're not watching a Netflix show. Like all we had was each other. So I understand what it's like to feel deeply about somebody that you have that personal connection with.
But
and
you knew she was real because you had actually met her in person.
That's right. And I'm not saying that it's not gullible, it's not naive. How many times can you be talking to somebody in a year where their FaceTime doesn't work? I understand all those things. And if anybody wants to criticize him for being gullible or naive, then it's an understandable thing because, you know, it's really hard to put yourself in that position and not be like, well, why didn't they see each other at least one time?
I have a theory on that too. And he kind of talks about it in the documentary. And he was talking about how, you know, he wanted a situation where he could just focus on football. And this allowed him to have a relationship with somebody, but not actually commit to it. And he could focus on football. Like he never had to go on dates. He never had to go to the movies. He didn't have to do any of that.
I also think too, that he went to a place that doesn't have a lot of people like him.
Exactly. And he talks about that too.
And he talks about it in the documentary, but there aren't a lot of Polynesian people from his background at Notre Dame. Yeah. So when he went to Notre Dame on a whim, which I thought was the most interesting thing in the documentary of how he decided not to go to USC.
You know, that one was explained a little differently than also how it happened in real life. Like I was on the radio with Rick Neuheisel last week. We did a show together. And Rick said, because Rick was UCLA's coach at the time, Rick said he had Manti Te'o committed.
Yeah.
And that he got a call like from a tearful Manti Te'o saying, I can't come. My dad says I can't come. And at the time, so Robbie Toma, who was interviewed in the documentary too, was a receiver at Notre Dame that was the high school teammate of Te'o. Robbie was the package deal. Like you had to take Robbie if you got Manti. And like Rick talked about telling Manti, you know, I have to call Robbie now and tell him that I can't take him because you're not coming. And Manti being like, oh, what, really? So yeah. There was more to it than, and I get you're doing a documentary. You don't want to get too bogged down in the recruiting.
Well, like the thought that I mean, recruiting is very complicated, but the thought of going from his background to Notre Dame is foreign. And honestly, if you go look at a lot of the Polynesian players that are still committing to this day, they're predominantly going to the West Coast. Yeah. Now, Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia's of the world are still getting in on them because, of course, they are. But they're still more comfortable on the West Coast because that's closer to familiarity. So if he didn't have a lot of other people that looked like him and came from his background and, frankly, had the same religion and faith as him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He's Mormon at a Catholic school.
And you find somebody who can understand you from that. And Naya, who was doing it at the time, did because he also or she was also in a position at that time.
Well, like Naya Tuiasosopo was like a worship leader at a church in California, or in the choir and all that. Yeah.
So at the time, they were able to connect on that level. So I 100% understand it. Now, what I did not know, and I always felt bad. Like I always just felt bad for him. Like the last 10 years, like when people make fun of him, you got to put into perspective too that this was 2010, 11?
This is 2012.
2012. Like this stuff wasn't really even happening yet. So like it's like so easy. We are all familiar with the Catfish show and FaceTime and stuff. It was like, and I FaceTime my friends. I FaceTime Brittany while we were dating for years. But did people FaceTime as regularly then as they did now, or was it Skype with a camera?
No, FaceTime was a brand new concept and it didn't work very well. So like that part of, it's not necessarily working. Like that
You
makes
can get
sense.
FaceTime now, it'd be crazy. But back then, like when you like look at it's just like it's just pretty sad. And the fact of the matter is that it had a real life impact on not only his well-being and his psyche, but his professional football career. And
he was doomed from the start as an NFL player because of all that.
They were showing the clips of him at Notre Dame. Oh my God, he was a beast. I mean, like he was so good at the college.
Now one thing I thought the documentary, and I get it, they're doing a documentary for an audience that doesn't necessarily remember vividly the 2012 college football season. Like they made it sound like if none of this had happened, Notre Dame would have a chance against Alabama. Notre Dame never had a chance against Alabama.
But you know what was actually really funny that I was thinking about during the documentary?
Yeah.
Because that was Urban Meyer's first year at Ohio State, and they were they weren't allowed in the playoff that year. I think if Ohio State would have advanced to the BCS championship game that year, I think Notre Dame would have won.
I mean,
right. Here we go.
Yeah, because that Ohio State team was deeply flawed, and Urban Meyer would tell you that.
And if there was 12-0 Notre Dame versus 12-0 Ohio State, which was the worst Ohio State team of the Urban Meyer era, I think Notre Dame would have rolled them. Did you think when you said, "Oh boy, here we go"? Did you think I was going to say Ohio State would have won?
No, I didn't know where you were going with that, but I think you're definitely right, and feel bad for Georgia because remember Georgia lost that classic SEC championship game against Alabama. Had there been a 14 playoff, those are probably your 4 teams. Georgia would have crushed Ohio State or Notre Dame had they played them.
The fact that Ohio State team went undefeated is still a miracle. I have no idea how that team
Braxton
went
Miller.
But it also kind of shows you the absurdity of the old system.
Yeah, Braxton Miller and duct tape essentially is how Ohio State went.
If Braxton Miller and duct tape played Notre Dame, who do you think would have won the game?
Notre Dame would have won that game. Notre Dame had some good players. Don't get me wrong. Like they had Lewis Nix. Obviously, they had Manti Te'o. I believe that's Stephon Tuitt at this point. There's some, Tyler Eifert's on that team. So there's some good players on this team. But they're starting Everett Golson at quarterback.
Yeah.
That Aaron Murray Georgia team if they play.
The way they perceived it in the document, or the way they communicated it in the documentary, was that that year's team was last year's Bama team, or 2 years at Bama team.
Right.
They made it seem like they were like 2001 Miami.
When 2012 Bama was actually really that team.
Really
I mean,
good.
they were great.
Yeah. So I really learned a lot, and I think that I hope at the very least that the people who watch this show, and somebody made a comment in our live chat here. That's true. The amount of ridicule that he received from mainstream media outlets like SNL and things like that, and how many things and details were wrong. And, a large portion of the documentary was about how some of the misreporting was done in the main ESPN SI stories.
All right, let's put a pin in that because we didn't get into what I think is the more interesting piece of this, and that's the media aspect of this.
Yes.
Because I do think there's a lot to chew on because it has to do with mistrust of the mainstream media. It has to do with when you get the story, getting it right on several levels, and then how we all react to what we consume. So let us take a little break. We're going to hear from Run Your Pool. We're going to hear from Peloton. And when we come back, we will discuss that because it is a meaty topic. We'll be right back. Get ready to compete with me and Ari and all the friends from the Andy Staples Show and friends, because you're going to get a chance this year to show us that you are better than us at picking games against the spread. And I realize if you listen to the show, you're saying, Andy, historically, you've not been very good at this, but trust me, I have been practicing. I'm going to be amazing at it. We're doing this through runyourpool.com. This is the coolest partnership because Run Your Pool is going to let us run a pool with you guys. So you go to play.runyourpool.com/staples. That's play.runyourpool.com/staples. You can pick games against us, against the spread. And also, you're going to see how much you like runyourpool.com, and you're probably going to be making pools with all your friends in all the other sports as well, because there's not just college football. They got the NFL where you can do picking against the spread. You can do survivor pools. You can do all kinds of different stuff. MLB, NBA, golf, you name it. So join our pool And there are some prizes. There's some Fanatics gift cards for the winner. And oh, by the way, Ari has promised that the winner is going to get a segment on the show. And I guess I have to go along with that. And so pick well, choose wisely. It's play.runyourpool.com/staples. Play.runyourpool.com/staples. I'm about to hit the road again. Gotten in good shape this summer. Trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to stay in shape? I know how I'm going to stay in shape. With Peloton, with Kirsten Ferguson, with Selena Samuela, with Andy Spear, with Adrian Williams, all my friends. Well, I don't actually know them, but these are world-class trainers who are in my ears all the time, telling me to push harder, telling me what I need to do, and making sure I get the best workout possible. And even when I'm on the road, I'll be able to do it because having that Peloton app turns any hotel gym into a world-class workout facility. I'm so excited. I want you to know about this too, because Peloton is not just treadmills and bikes. It's a community where you learn to keep pushing because there are other people there doing the same things you are, going through the same stuff you are, going through the same life things you are, and they're still getting it done every single day with the help of those Peloton trainers. So if you want to get a bike or a tread, go to onepeloton.com, check out special offers for first-time members. If you want to just have a fitness program that fits seamlessly into your life, sign up for the Peloton app. I've been doing it since 2020, and it has helped me transform my body, and I'm going to make sure I stay in shape thanks to Peloton. Welcome back. All right, we got to talk about the media aspects of this because it's two different things that are the same thing. It is tapping into the public's general mistrust of the mainstream media and the joy and the schadenfreude of, I think I pronounced that word right.
I think it's Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, yes, that. I always get it wrong. Of exposing the mainstream media being wrong. And we're talking huge outlets. ESPN, New York Times, Sports Illustrated. And then there's also the aspect of when you get the story, in a story about people not verifying stuff, you throw an off-the-record comment in there where somebody claims that Manti Te'o was in on it, when now we find out absolutely wasn't. And it changes the tenor of how people view everything from then on. But we'll start with the first one because I was at SI at the time. I did not write the Manti Te'o cover story. ESPN covered it. The New York Times covered it. And you always want to think you'd be the one who got it, who was like, nope, can't verify this, leaving it out, or nope, we're gonna find this person doesn't exist. This is a story now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you think, and it was a good reminder for me because I've always, they teach you in journalism school, but as you get going, you don't always dot your I's and cross your T's as well as you should. But since then, I have this question I just asked myself: can I verify this? Can I absolutely 100% verify this? And if I can't, you just leave it out.
The whole story was that.
Yeah.
So it had me thinking, because the most interesting situation about this whole thing is that Deadspin wrote a story making fun of everybody for making mistakes, and they did a tremendous job reporting it. And they found out that who it was that was behind it. They found out that people had information wrong.
It was an incredible job reporting that story.
But also, what they put on in their story, potentially implicating him, was more harmful than the errors in the other stories.
I don't know that it was more harmful than the errors in the other stories. I do think but it didn't help for sure. The other stories, everybody really wanted to jump on this. And look, I've had to ask some people in some really bad stages of grief some very uncomfortable questions as part of the job. Like, I remember as an intern at Florida Today at the newspaper in Brevard County, Florida. So I'm 19 years old. I have to do a story about a city worker in Titusville who got killed by basically a driver who fell asleep at the wheel. He was mowing the median. She fell asleep, hit him with her car, and he died. And Like, I remember every detail of that story. His name was Willie Lee Graham. He was 67. I remember his salary from the city. Like, I had to call his family the day he died and ask for comment. And it was just brutal. Like,
Yeah, I can't imagine. I don't know how
that's
people do
part
it
of the
every day.
job, but that's
Yeah.
part of the job. Like, so, and that's the hardest part is sometimes you're like, oh, and we jump on we jump on these tragedy stories, but you still have to go get the other uncomfortable details. And that's where nobody thought to call Ine Kakua's family and ask, like, what do you think of Manti Te'o? Even though that would be obviously very uncomfortable, because remember, all these stories are coming out that week. I guess it's the Wednesday that this happened, allegedly, which of course it didn't happen. But that's also the same day his grandmother died, which actually happened.
Well, there's two things I want to say about this. First, I want to ask you a question. I want you to be honest, and I'll be honest in return. How many times in your career, if you had to estimate, you've written in a sports sense, it's a sports story about a tragedy where somebody passed away?
Oh,
it's got to be 100, right?
It's
200.
It's over. It's in the hundreds.
And how many times in those hundreds did you verify the death of the person by locating their birth certificate?
You mean their death certificate?
Their death certificate. Sorry, yes.
Or
at
almost
least
always, I'd say every one. Either I found an obituary or
okay.
And like I did, it's funny or not funny. It's awful. That same year, I did a story on Jarvis Jones, who is a pass rusher at Georgia. He was like led the nation in sacks, I think, the year before, and he had a horrific story where his brother was killed at this horrible bar thing. It was just a bad deal. And so, yeah, I found the police reports and all that stuff. And it's part of the deal.
So, like, I've had a lot of stories in my time, and maybe it's more so as a beat writer. But if a player on the team of the beat that I cover had a father who passed, or a mother who passed, or their sister or brother, this is something that you encounter with 85 scholarship players, a lot of tragedy all the time. And I can tell you wholeheartedly that I've done my fair share of confirming these things. But if somebody is talking about the loss of their father from when they were young, that wasn't something that people verified.
You wouldn't Google the dad's name just to read the obituary and get more detail?
I think, absolutely. But I can't say, I'm not going to sit here on my journalism high horse and say that I definitively
here's the thing, right?
Every single death that I ever wrote about.
You probably did it more often than you remember, because it's easy. Like when an actual person dies, there's a record now on the internet of almost everybody.
Yeah.
Because you have these obituary websites, and you have
But the point is that it wouldn't even dawn on you. Like, how could it even occur to you that like, as a reporter in that scenario, as much as we give Manti Te'o flack for buying it, I also can understand that in that world that it couldn't even occur to one of the reporters at ESPN or SI or the people who made the mistakes that this did not happen.
Well, I'll tell you, working at SI, and I know the deadline situation that Pete Thamel was working under. So I understand how it happened. Like, that interview took place on a Sunday. The issue closes on Monday. They want everything by Sunday night. They want everything fact checked by Monday morning. Like, in the SI fact checking process, like when you wrote a magazine story, the fact checker would send you back questions, and sometimes you get so mad at the questions because they would feel like the dumbest questions in the world. But it was actually an important part of the process, because sometimes the dumb questions, you got to make sure you answer them. Like,
yeah, because
is this
the dumb
person actually a person?
Go...
Like, there'd be a lot of times where they would ask me, did this person actually say this? And I'd be like, of course they said it. I wouldn't have quoted them if they hadn't said it.
Yeah, but it's those dumb questions that if they go unanswered and they're mistakes,
right,
are the dumbest things. Yeah.
Sometimes when you get in a time crunch like that, they don't get answered, and then you
assume that that's what happened.
Yeah, and you got people on the West Coast, and you got to have it done by Monday morning, and literally everything came in Sunday night, and
everybody in the media had been writing about it, so it's not like one idiot made a mistake. Like, every single person in sports media who wrote about this made that mistake.
But it's interesting. I found it very interesting hearing Jack Dickey and Tim Burke talk about their thought process as they were working on the story for Deadspin. And Jack and I cross at SI. We worked there at the same time a little bit, but we didn't know each other. We exchanged some emails. Tim, I know a little bit better. His wife was the copy desk chief at the school paper at Florida when I was there, and have known him for a while. And so, but they had the same, I find it very interesting. They had the same thought that you and I had when we were trying to figure out how we were going to write the Bishop Sycamore story.
They did. Yeah. And I was talking to my friend about that, of just like, how do they make ESPN look foolish? And I think there's a certain aha, because everybody loves to laugh at ESPN. But like ESPN did, like, I can't sit here.
Except the difference was it wasn't just ESPN for them. It was everybody. It was the entire mainstream sports media.
But I also can't sit here and say to you, I wish I could, but I'm going to be honest with the people listening to the show and to myself. There is a high likelihood that I also would have made that same mistake.
Me too. Like I said, you want to think that you would have been the one who got it.
I do, yes.
But I don't know that. I don't know.
And the craziest thing about it too is that it was all right there in front of everyone's face too. Like like honestly, it wasn't like Tim Burke. I mean, they did a great job, but it's not like he reinvented the wheel. He was just the first one, or the tip, because like honestly, it was a tip that came into Deadspin that got them to look into it to begin with. So
they did a really good job getting down to it, like finding the woman that Tuiasosopo had used pictures of to be Naya Tuiasosopo.
Yeah, and I know it was 2012 was a long time ago, and it was a different time.
Like that,
how that woman never noticed with the media coverage, how not one person in her life was like, they keep posting pictures of Naya Tuiasosopo who passed away.
That is amazing to me. And I wonder if Twitter and Instagram had been. Twitter existed. I think Instagram's
a day. Right.
Yeah, I think Instagram existed at that point, but was not a big thing yet. I do wonder how quickly she would have seen that photo,
seen her own picture. Yeah, because it's just like, and you think about how many people were obsessed with college football and Notre Dame. It was the biggest brand in the sport at that time. You would think that it would be in the body of a story somewhere, or a family member or a cousin or a friend from high school would have seen this and been like, hey, that's not like the fact that Tim Burke had to be the person to explain it to her is like mind blowing. So, and I think it does a very good job of underlying how different times were as little as 10 years ago. So, I just hope that as a result of this documentary, Andy, that people can view him differently, because I think that he did a very good job of explaining his situation, but also
I never thought he was in on it.
Me neither. It didn't even occur to me. It
didn't make any sense. This is another thing, like, and this is the part where I would blame them for putting in the anonymous quote saying a friend of Tuiasosopo thought that Te'o was in on it. Like, you don't have any verification of that. One of the things that when you're writing a story that you kind of want to make sure you get right is everybody's motivation. What is everybody's motivation for doing something? And if you can't figure it out, don't speculate on it. And in this case, unless you had Tuiasosopo saying, I think inside I'm really a woman, and that's how I'd like to live my life, and this is what I was projecting onto the internet. Like, unless you have that, you don't have the real motivation for this. And so ascribing motivation to any person in the story without being able to figure that out,
I think if that one paragraph would have been left out of the Deadspin story, that Manti's life would have been different.
I don't know that it would have been any different. He still would have been made fun of.
People would have made fun of him. But like the lack, like if you think about what he was struggling with at the end of the documentary, he wasn't struggling with being made fun of. He was struggling with his lack of judgment, right? Which was what guided him on the football field, which would have been the same. But he also was struggling with, the questions about his sexuality on television in front of his parents.
Yeah, Katie Couric asking him that in front of his parents, which he knows the answer to that. He answered it very definitively.
Yes. But, I think that the fact that the people making fun of him, I think, made it harder for him to kind of just set the record straight. And people making fun of him about things that weren't true it's like an avalanche. You've been on the wrong side of a Twitter avalanche. If Vol Nation get after you every now and then, it's happened to me. Absolutely. It's happening to me right now with Michigan fans.
Absolutely.
But like the idea is, And like, listen, we've all been in situations where the team that we cover or the program that we cover has crisis control, the way Notre Dame was trying to work through. How do we handle this? What do we do? But like, I feel like it would have probably, and again, everything's hindsight is 2020, but like, he could have just come out and said, hey guys, I had an online relationship with a person that I cared about very deeply. It turns out that person isn't true. I'm heartbroken. I'm devastated. And I'm hurt by what that person put me through. And you might call me gullible or naive or dumb, and maybe that I am, but I'm truly and utterly embarrassed and heartbroken over what had occurred here. And I'm going to do my best as a man to mend my wounds and move on with my life. That would have cleared up everything.
You've probably just earned yourself a lot of money in the future as a crisis PR consultant, because that would have been probably the best way to handle it. The problem is, I think you might have run into some resistance from Manti or the family in admitting then that you got duped, because I think there was a reluctance to admit to getting duped, and that they eventually did that, but they didn't want to come out and say that.
But also you have to keep in mind too that they were also months removed from the NFL draft.
Yeah.
You know, they had other things like their financial well-being. I mean, he slid to the second round.
And you're getting the questions because then you bring in the draft industrial complex and all the questions from the NFL teams, which historically they've not been the most enlightened on these subjects.
That's right. So
There's a great discussion, by the way, in our chat, in our live stream chat between Adam and Mitchell that I'd like to highlight here. And Mitchell makes the good point, and we've talked about this a few minutes ago, but I do want to reiterate this. While learning Naya Tuiasosopo's story, like learning what has happened since, makes the motivation make sense, I'm with Mitchell. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't excuse what Tuiasosopo did, not just to Manti Te'o, but as Naya admitted in the documentary, other people too.
Yeah. And I do think that there is a way to be empathetic towards people who have struggles that are different than yours, while also holding the same people accountable for their actions. Because just because you're struggling with something, and it doesn't have to be this specific thing, it could be anything. I have my own struggles in life. It doesn't excuse the way that I project onto others. So, you know, I do think that I hope that people who watched the documentary left the same way that I left, which was, I didn't really consider the person who did this. I considered Manti, and my takeaway from it was, we have a new perspective of a person who's been ridiculed. He looks great in this documentary, and I hope that this finally helps him let go of those things. Like, that's the point, right? Like, that's what you're supposed to get from it. And what you think of the perpetrator is, I guess, your own deal. You know what I mean? We all have our own opinions, whatever. But like,
one thing I would have liked to have seen in the documentary, because they had a disclaimer beforehand saying that no one, when they were interviewed, knew the other person's current situation. And I would have liked to have known what Manti thought when he found out about what happened to Tuiasosopo, because we know now that he knows, because he's been interviewed by a bunch of people. I saw he did an interview with Entertainment Tonight where he explained he was referring to Tuiasosopo as Naya, and so he clearly knows what's happened now. And I would have liked to have seen what his reaction to that was, and was there empathy? Was there still anger? Like, I'm genuinely curious. That's more as a viewer than anything else.
Can you be angry and empathetic at the same time?
I think you can.
I think you can too. I think that the type of person that he was that got him into this scenario, the gullible, giving, caring, loving person that he is the reason why he is able to let go of it now. You know what I mean? Like, if you were just the type of person that didn't care about others, didn't want to be there for somebody who they thought was going through a hard time, didn't like think the best in people that would put them in a situation where they were able to fall for a scheme like this, then you would be the type of person that would have anger and hatred in your heart. But he obviously is a good human being, and the world is a better place as a result of his existence. And because he is who he is, I think that it's clear that he is probably still hurt and angry. His mom, I think, said at the beginning of the documentary that they still hate that person. But he said that he forgives that person and hopes that they find themselves and live a happy and healthy life moving forward. So I think we got that answer. What I would like to know is more in depth how he personally felt about everything that happened during it. Like, were you heartbroken? It's not because like I didn't know that that the person brought Lene back to life after.
Yes.
Like I didn't know that, and the fact that he was dealing with that at the Heisman ceremony, what I thought was the most riveting part of the entire documentary. Could you imagine having that demon inside of your heart, not knowing what side of the equation you're on,
and getting asked questions about it, and then
on
having
live
to
television?
and having to keep the story straight. I was also just glad that there were no video of me asking any questions and all that stuff, because I was there. I was in the room. Although I think I was handling Johnny Manziel stuff at the time. So
yeah, you were. Yeah, you're. And like I got to remember too that you were like big time back then already. You know what I mean? So but I mean you have a better perspective of the way it should have been covered because you had progressed in your career to a point where you were kind of in the thick of it. I mean you had a story of going up to the person's house.
Yeah,
so
I was just very glad I didn't draw the Manti Te'o feature that week. I mean, because then I would have been put in that position. I explained the deadline situation earlier. You know, like I said, everybody likes to think they would have been the one who caught it. I'm not sure I would have been.
Yeah.
There's some really good reporters who didn't.
And I think there's a lot of people that are probably feeling like crap about themselves right now for doing what they did in terms of ridiculing him. And I hope they do. I hope it's a nice lesson. You know, and I'm somebody who pokes fun at people sometimes too on the internet. And, you know, like we make college football jokes all the time, you know, about, you know, coaches and players and, you know, funny things that you feel like are harmless. But like, it really kind of puts in perspective that these have an impact on people. And it's so easy to be a nameless, faceless person on Twitter who yaps at people and says hurtful things. And the fact of the matter is that we're real life people with real life emotions, and that has an impact. And I mean, it ruined his NFL career. I believe that.
Well, I hope things go well for Manti Te'o, because none of that talking about it could have been easy. And, you know, he comes off looking great. He comes off looking like he handled it with more grace than most of us ever would have. So, yeah, I hope he's going to be all right. And Ari, this has been quite a discussion. We started with an argument about the Heisman Trophy, and we got into a crazy documentary, a crazy story, a very in-depth media discussion. So this is about as esoteric as this podcast is ever going to get.
I had a really, really good time talking with you about all this stuff today. And Andy, I feel like we still haven't even scratched the surface of the depth of all that stuff. So I appreciate everybody listening. And hey, it was good to argue with you too. I kind of helped me to let out some steam, because I'm kind of have some built up tension.
You needed it. And so we'll point that we're not First Take. Like, we're not going to fake our arguments. Like, no, we don't get there and say, I'm going to take this side, you're going to take this side. If you see us yelling at each other like we were earlier in the show, it's because we really believe it. So it's
actually a miracle that it doesn't happen more often, considering that you think I'm a psychopath. So, like, you know.
Well, listen, you did text me a Papacitos take last night that I do have some anger issues over.
You think it's genuinely good?
I think Papacitos is delicious.
I know, but I think Burger King is delicious. It doesn't mean that it should be like treated a certain way.
Yeah, but you're wrong and I'm right. That's the difference.
No, I know, but like it's like, yeah, it gets the job done. I mean, I just don't understand how people think
it more than gets the job done.
I don't understand. Here's my number one take. If you're
a
Dallas native or a Texas native who knows what Papacitos is, I don't understand why it has a cult following when all it is Chewy's.
It's not Chewy's.
It really is.
I eat a lot of Chewy's. We have a Chewy's where I live.
It's the same quality of food.
It's way better.
Okay. And maybe I'm just not a profound.
You got to get some shrimp brochettes. Tell them to bring you an extra stack of tortillas. Dip the tortillas in the butter that comes with the shrimp brochette. Eat the shrimp brochette, which is shrimp stuffed with cheese and jalapeno, wrapped in bacon and grilled. And then they give you drawn butter to dump over it. And also to dip your tortillas in.
Like, I grew up in Phoenix, where Mexican food, you can get the best burrito or taco you've ever had in a gas station. So like when people, and like there's a lot of Hispanic people in Dallas too. So I don't know, there's some real authentic Mexican food here. You know, It's like I want a fish taco from a gas station in tinfoil for $2.99.
Whether it's authentic or not does not change how delicious it is. You are the person who thinks Domino's cheesy bread is more delicious than most appetizers.
And it's not even about authentic. I'm just saying, like, usually authentic tends to be better. Like, I think that Domino's is good. I don't think it's the best pizza on earth, like people keep saying. An authentic Italian pizza from an Italian restaurant that's done right is better than Domino's. I just don't, and like also too, like the way that people go about Pappasito's, which is waiting in line for an hour and a half.
Oh no, you
Like,
don't
I'm gonna
wait in
wait
line.
in
If you're waiting in
It's
line
so
for an hour and a
busy.
half for Pappasito's, go
Dude, it
somewhere
is
else.
so busy. Every time I go there, it is so busy, and it's been 3 times. And honestly, I have no desire to ever go there again. And now I'll go when you come in.
Maybe when I join you there, we will do Pappasito's correctly, and you'll feel differently. So,
Or we could get real barbecue and have like really good food.
we could also do that. Ari, it's been a pleasure.
Till next time.
That's right. The show was brought to you by Sling TV, the TV you love for a price you'll love. Check out sling.com for special offers.